we got to talk about
Yeah.
CGC price increases, guys. CGC price increases. We were in the backstage before the show even began, and we were already talking about CGC prices increases. Very, very hot topic. So you can see right there, that's kind of the slide of where they have gone up. I'll kind of throw out the 3 questions I have in the slide and kind of let you guys answer it. But, you know, is this business as usual? Who cares? It's just, okay, yeah, we're all going to huff and puff and whatever. We're just going to send in our books tomorrow to CGC. Will CBCS gain some market share as a result of this? I saw a lot of people posting on Instagram being very angry towards CGC and saying that they're going to go full CBCS. Or is this going to cause, you know, a raw book rise? Like, screw graded comic books. I'm buying that raw. Now, Rob, I got to start with you because you were here not too long ago. PSA raised their prices. A lot of people were pounding their fists. And one of the questions was, you know, is a company like Beckett gonna really get market share? And I guess maybe start the conversation by kind of sharing what you felt like happened with PSA.
Yeah. So what I found over the last 2 years is the sports card market and the comic book market have moved in tandem with each other, with the sports card market kind of breaking the ice. And then the same trials and tribulations that we've gone through on that side, you guys go through like 3 months behind us, and the same crazy spikes and peaks and all this nonsense. Same thing. You guys are like a month or 2 behind us for whatever reason. It just seems to work that way. Same thing. We had massive grading backlogs, and then all of a sudden you guys had them, and you know, it just kind of works this way. And for those not familiar, on the sports card side of things, PSA is our CGC. They are the number one. They sell for the most. They're the most well respected. Of course, there's grading wars depending on what camp you fall into, but they did the same thing the last year or so. They raised prices multiple times. Part of it was the control of backlog. I'm sure part of it was inflation. I'm sure part of it was they just wanted to charge more for their services because they're a business. And what they quickly found, the main reason that they cited was to help reduce the amount of cards coming into their backlog. And what they quickly found is that raising the price wasn't enough. Everyone just still kept sending them stuff, and in some cases sent them more things.
It's a good problem.
What they ended up having to do is actually eliminate the lower tiers completely. Up until the last month, you could not submit a card to PSA for less than $150, and they've now opened up the $100 tier. And we're probably 6 months away from them opening up the $50 tier. So imagine, to compare that to CGC, imagine everything on that list went away except Express. That's what PSA did for 9 months. Nothing changed. Well, a very tiny bit changed in the grading company sphere. 9 months later, even after basically shutting down and not taking submissions, guess what? PSA is still the one people want to use the most. It's still the one that resales for the most, even with them being completely closed. Some smaller companies gained a little bit of ground. What actually happened in some cases is PSA doing that actually screwed over the smaller companies because they weren't set up to handle all of a sudden everyone sending them their inventory. Then they got massive backlogs and people got pissed off at them. So to quickly answer your questions there, business as usual, yes. Will CBCS gain market share? No. Will raw books rise? Probably not. I honestly think this is status quo. I mentioned it earlier. I was talking about this very topic on Reggie Collects last night. I think this is one of the most overblown things I've ever seen. The price increase is minuscule. CGC adds tremendous value to your books, and you're complaining over a $2 to $3 increase. I understand they have massive backlogs. I understand it could be extremely frustrating, but every grading company is like that. And CGC is also the most liquid on the secondary market, and that's a factor as well. Yeah. So I just, to make a long story short, I honestly think this is a bunch of people, you know, with pitchforks and torches in the air, just kind of all standing around. And in about a month, they're all going to be looking at each other like, wait, what were we mad at? And then it's just going to be business as usual again.
That's what happened with the first price thing too. Everybody was like mad for like a week and made all their videos. And then it was like, all right, time to send my books. Where are you going?
And some people did send to CBCS, but then CBCS got a backlog, and then CBCS raised their price.
Yeah.
So they're like, oh, CBCS, they shouldn't have raised their price when they have a backlog. The same stuff. they said about
I
CGC.
think it just depends.
So-
and like we were talking in the backstage, I think it just depends on what you want with the book. Like, do you want a book slab because it's going to stay in your PC? 100%. Do whatever, PGX, CBC, whatever. But if you're looking at it from like, is it an investment book? Or are you planning to flip it? Which from the last topic, there shouldn't be anybody in here that's a dirty flipper, right? Except me.
Right.
Then, why do you need CGC, right? So I think it just depends on what you want with the book. But like Rob said, CGC in the secondary market holds more value. You can put a book, same grade, CGC versus CBCS, and the CGC is still going to sell more. It always is.
Yeah.
And sell faster, probably.
Yeah, 100%.
Drew, now,
To
one thing I
Ryan's
do have.
point- Oh, go ahead. To Ryan's
I was
point,
gonna say,
really
one
quick.
thing I do have a comment on was that you had made a comment about raw books, and I'll say for modern, yes, that's true that having it graded adds a significant amount of value. But I've noticed in raw books for like Silver Age and kind of like older books, raw prices have come in line with
You're right.
graded
Yeah.
prices.
You're right, because I do buy a lot of raw stuff, and I look for those like 3.0s, 4.0s, 5.0s, and I see a lot of people charging them at the FMV of it
Yeah.
being graded.
That's
Yep.
a big thing in the seller market. You've got a lot of sellers that are selling or putting raw price or graded prices on raw books.
And
Drew-
I think, I mean, a big part of it is like you look at it and you go, well, because it used to be, it's like you would get a book graded and it's like it would double in price. And it's like, well, why should I sell a book, to someone and then have it, double in price just from them spending 30 or 40 bucks, like back when value tier existed, 30 or 40 bucks on getting the book graded. And so that's why usually when when I'm buying books, I buy them at those types of prices now too. I buy them and when I am pricing a raw book, I'm just backing out grading fees. That's
Right.
really all I'm doing. Cause I've noticed that the prices are selling about the same as graded. So it is what it is. And I think part of the reason is that the only really accurate sources of sale of pricing data are for graded books, so
Yeah.
people are going to GPA, Go Collect, Cover Price, those places. And the pricing is graded.
Listen, it's a business, as the first question says, business as usual. Yeah. Inflation, economics, it's how we have these conversations of, hey, when you talk to your grandfather, bread was a dime and gas was a nickel or, a quarter, whatever the case may be. That's what happens over time. And it's going to continue to happen. And I think the pitchforks came with, the two biggest things that I got from people that were like complaining was, man, how could they do this in a 6 to 8 month period, followed by it's a pandemic. It's like, okay, but you're still buying these like comics and doing that. Like if it's a pandemic and you're that worried, why are you spending money on comics?
Yeah, it's a luxury, and that's why
Right?
I think it's kind of crazy to complain about it. It's like this isn't food or rent or electricity or whatever. The comic books are a luxury. Grading
But it's
books
like
is a
Rob said
luxury.
too. Like if you actually look at the numbers, I mean, it's $2 to $5 max. That's small on the like where inflation is. Like that's still small.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Drew,
my grading went from $25 a card to $100 a card practically overnight.
Yeah.
Like I'm not gonna freak out about a $2 to $3 change.
Well,
at all.
and what it does
Drew,
is
let me
go ahead.
Let me just pull in Drew real quick right here, because not to derail where you guys were talking it, but Drew, you just did that CBCS unboxing of a bunch of great books.
Yeah.
And would you? Well, let's just say you're that person, right? You're like, you got some books in your PC, you're about to send them in, but you never know. I might sell a book one day.
Yep.
Does this price make you more inclined to send it to CBCS just for you?
I've been a fan of CBCS for a while. My mileage is different. I don't buy and sell in a lot of the same arenas that, Rob and Ryan do. I'm selling, business, like person to person. Everybody's right there in front of me or, face to face. I price CBCS books exactly like CGC books. Every dealer that I know that I'm friends with, that I set up next to at these shows, all do the same thing. At an auction, absolutely, CGC is going to pull more. At a show where you're sitting there, you've got the books in your hand, every once in a while, you'll find the CGC fan or purist that just does not want a CBCS book. But most of the time, people are just buying the book because they want the book. We also don't tend to be out here, in the Midwest, small to medium shows selling 9/8 of major blue chip keys and stuff like that. Most of what we sell would be, 9.2s, 9.4s, some 9.8s, but most books that you see at these shows are 4-figure books at the most. You're not cracking into the 5 and 6 figures for a lot of what we sell. The reason I personally have gone with CBCS is because I have used their pressing service just for books I don't trust myself to press. I've gotten a lot better results from their in-house pressing than I have from CCS. The last order I sent to CCS to be pressed, I should have just sat a brick on top of my books and sent them in because it was terrible. So CBCS, I don't think is going to gain any market share out of this. They've already picked up a bit of volume and are struggling to get through it. I've had 3 orders there over the course of the last 8 months, and there were some issues, some delays. But in the end, everything got back to me safe, and it's in the new case and it looks great. So I'm happy with it.
Right.
So I don't see these price increases as being a huge thing, other than the fact that just nothing is getting cheaper right now. Nothing's staying the same. I think it's just one more area where we're seeing the dollar go a shorter distance, and it's just like, goddamn, now I got to pay more to have my comics graded too.
Yeah.
Listen,
Ryan,
you guys, I don't know if you guys have Tim Hortons, but Tim Hortons up here in Canada is like Timmy's, right?
Yeah.
And like I think it was like 2 years ago they made this like upgrade, and it was like a quarter. And people lost their freaking mind. Okay.
Yeah.
Like they were talking about it on Ellen. Guess what? There's still people that are buying Timmy's. They're still getting 3 to 4 copies a day. They're still, like, that is the go-to.
Every time I go to Canada, it's like I always go to Tim Hortons. Airport in Calgary.
I'll put it on the list.
Well, Ryan, I kind of, before I threw it to Drew, did you have like a little point you wanted to chime back in on before we kind of maybe move on to the next topic?
I said Ryan or Rob. Sorry.
I said Ryan, or Rob, either one.
I'll let Ryan go first.
I mean, I don't really remember, other than just the fact that I wasn't surprised to see this. I mean, especially once they got purchased, I was like, we should probably expect to see yearly price increases. I mean, I think that's going to be pretty normal. It's going to be a small amount. I mean, the reason someone else had commented on Instagram, I remember, and they thought maybe they would see like another huge influx from this. And I was like, no, I mean, like $5, I don't think is going to cause a huge influx. The reason the last one did was because they eliminated that value tier. And so you actually had more like a jump from like 30 to 70 or 75 or whatever it was. So it was a pretty significant price increase. Whereas with this, I mean, $5, I mean, when you're talking about, books that are, if you're going for like the standard tier, so a book that's like 1,000, you're not going to be rushing to submit, your books for $5.
Right.
And let's be honest, if we all want to be outraged about something, let's be outraged about the price of bags and boards.
Just a couple more things I want to toss in.
Yeah, Rob, go ahead.
Before we move on to the next thing. I see a lot of people in the comments saying about like, well, why are, they've raised prices twice already. Why aren't turnaround times getting better? This, that, and the other thing. I mean, look around you. I could not imagine owning a massive business like this and trying to scale it in the time that we're living in right now, not to use the pandemic as an excuse, but like my daily just going to Chipotle to get lunch is drastically affected from all this because they can't find enough people just to make some tacos. And you're trying to say, oh yeah, CGC, just staff up and get these trusted people in there to look over my books and assign a grade to them overnight like that, when the most base level industries can't find people to come in to do work right now. Like, how do you expect a company like that to actually get people in the door, train them correctly, which takes time, and then deal with COVID protocols, actually retaining employees and all that to just happen overnight? That's such a slow process.
And look at what they have to do, like page counts. I mean, that is not a fun job.
No. Yeah, I could not imagine sitting there flipping through books all day. As fun as that might sound, I bet you that gets old after the end of about the second.
Oh, yeah. Well, and here's a terrifying hypothetical. What happens when they can no longer source their inner and outer wells? What if supply chain issues
and that could be part
production
of the price
problems
as well,
right?
Just to cover that stuff. To me, there's one last quick comment and then a quick question. I almost want to kind of turn around back on you guys. I think the only thing more overblown than the CGC price increase is the new tax law in the United States. I saw comments on that earlier. I think that is
Welcome to the
most
party,
overblown
boys.
free tax thing in the world. To compare with the CGC price increase. And the thing I kind of want to flip back to you guys. I don't if I derail you, Mickey, feel free to move along. Do you think CGC should go the path of PSA for at least a certain amount of time period? Because how else are they going to get caught up on their backlog? If they don't stop incoming submissions, the backlog is going to keep getting larger. It's not getting smaller.
My problem.
Think they should go and say, okay, you know what? Modern Economy and Standard, we're just calling a timeout for a few months. If you still want to send high-end stuff to us, that's fine. But we want to actually focus on getting this backlog knocked out and wearing this down, and then we'll open back up again. Do you guys think that's even feasible, or is that crazy?
I want to hear what you guys are going to say, because you guys would be saying something smarter than I would. But like, to me, like the logic in that is like Thanos snapping half of existence out of, the universe. But like, 65 years from now, everyone's going to repopulate, or it's going to get up to the population again. So like, I don't know if that's the solution that makes sense.
Ryan heard me say this story, and I recognize some people in the chat. Big shout outs to the chat, by the way. You guys are
big shout outs to the
great.
Chat.
Yeah.
Chat's great.
But I've said this a few times, this story where there is a guy, a local guy who, every Wednesday when new comic books come, he grabs them, looks at them, pays the guy, pushes them back because they send him off to CGC. And he's got, whether they be nothing books or big books, right? But he's sending pretty much everything that he gets on a Wednesday, which is like a stack like that, maybe sometimes bigger, off to CGC. So you do have a lot of these books that I shouldn't say are nothing books, because books, everybody collects differently, right? So if that's the way that person wants to, and if there's one, there's got to be more. But I do think that they need to put a stop, and here's why. Me and Ryan are good friends with Chris at so is Swag with Vancouver Comic Junkie. I mean, he's got books that haven't even been processed yet from like July. Now, we all don't just send, most of us don't just send a book to CGC the way it is. We clean it, we press it, we do all those tricks. But after a while, if it's just sitting there, you're not going to get the grade. So, if I'm spending money on these other services to make sure that my investment or my item is going to be at the top condition, and it's just sitting in a factory. And people sometimes laugh at this when I say this, but I also say, like the humidity in Florida, and, that like it's different, right? Like I'm up in Canada, elevate, like all that stuff to paper affects things. So sometimes, I do think that they need to come out and say, hey, let's stop. Let's just get everything out and then, kind of go. I think it would help. Or maybe just, let us know, hey, you know what, guys, we're not going to be doing stuff right now. Something.
Yeah. Ryan or Drew, do you have thoughts on what Rob had asked?
Go ahead, Ryan.
I don't remember. I'm sorry.
CGC cut out lower tier submissions for a while to get caught up.
Yes,
like they just froze those submissions.
The reason I don't think they will is because of how big of a business that is for a lot of artists. There are a lot of artists that will do these like massive, pre-screen, or like they'll pre-sell 9/8, and they'll have thousands of them sent in at a time. And I don't know if they'll want to potentially burn that bridge with that artist, because maybe that person then goes, okay, I'm going to CBCS now, or maybe it's just like somebody else in the comment mentions, like, why would they want to lose out on all that revenue? That's really what's going to be. They're losing a lot of money potentially when they make that decision. It
was pretty noble of PSA to do what they did. I feel like, it's pretty respectable.
I see a lot of people in the comments saying, why would they ever do that? Why, that will never work. They'd leave the door open for other competition to come up. And my answer to that would be, is the biggest sports card grader in the world did it, and it turned out just fine for them. Like they're 6 months away probably from completely clearing their backlog. They've slowly started to open up new submission tiers. And when they open back up, the running joke I've been making is that there'll be a fully operational Death Star, and they'll probably smash everybody else because they've scaled up. They've used this time wisely, invested the money into infrastructure. And when they open back up fully operational again, they'll probably be able to outprice everybody else and outprocess everybody else because of the year plus that they've done in doing that. and it really hasn't hurt them at all, in my opinion. Maybe a little tiny bit, but not noticeably.
It's
So
like when
one
Cartman
area
got
that-
a theme park in South Park.
Yeah.
One area that might be a little different with cards versus comics is I feel like, so, and this is again going with not moderns, but a little older, is I get the impression that with cards, you add significantly more value with grading because it's so tight on whether it's a 9 or a 9.5 or a 10, and there's such huge price differences within those very small margins. Whereas with comics, I mean, I know I saw some people in the chat saying, they don't trust people's grading and that kind of thing. But as long as you have enough experience, you can learn to grade books. You even if somebody says something is a 6, you're like, no, that's a 4 or 5. You can figure that stuff out and you can pay the price accordingly. And so I think that's something where maybe they would fear that it would push more people to just like, it would grow the raw market even more. Now, granted, the raw market is huge compared to the graded market. I remember this being talked about before, is that there's the number of collectors, and it's probably changed a little in the last year, but the number of collectors that owned raw or graded books is actually relatively small. Because I think like those are your first graded books, aren't they? On the swag on the top of your shelf.
These ones up here.
You didn't own graded
No.
books until this year.
Yeah, I was not big into. I'm not against it. It just was like, it's just cheaper to buy raw. So why wouldn't I?
He's been bit by the bug.
Yeah. All CGC by the end of next year. Drew, let me get you with the last.
Yeah.
If EGC put a press release out and said we're cutting all tiers off, express and lower or whatever. Do you think CBCS, do they wake up the next morning like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever? Or do they wake up and go,
No, I think it's
shit.
doomsday. I think it's doomsday.
they already had that tech. I mean, they went from like a 1 week delay or 1 week or 2 week turnaround time to, I think they're like CGC, they're multiple months. So they have experienced that.
From a business move, from PSA's perspective, it's an interesting angle when you look at it from that way, because it's almost like, yeah, they kind of screwed themselves, but they also screwed their competition harder because they set themselves up for this.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden the dump truck fell on top of their competition, and they didn't, in some cases they adapted okay, but in some cases they completely screwed them. Like they completely screwed over Beckett. They put a quick dink in SGC and then they ended up coming back. But a lot of the smaller companies were not set up for the increase in volume, and it actually made them look worse in the long run.
Yeah,
Let's hear from Drew, and then
Okay.
Drew, why don't you chime in for this, and then we'll move on to the next topic.
I think to your last question, Rob, it would be doomsday because CBCS has had some issues just with balancing the workload. Like you'll have people that have orders from April that haven't been touched yet, but I know, and this is all tangential, of course, people who submitted orders the same time I did in August that they're not even checked in yet, or there's been no movement. It's just everybody is so buried right now, they've got to dig out. Right. But as far as cutting the actual tiers out, I have a love-hate relationship with that question, because as a person who doesn't submit modern books, especially not new releases, I get really frustrated when I see special promotions, and this is all prior to the madness of the last 18 months, special promotions where you send in this many books, we'll give you, the discount on 2-day modern push through, whatever, the hell they call it. Or we're going to bring in a revolving door of artists for special signings, get your books in now, and we'll push all this to the front of the line. And here I am, I've sent, thousands of dollars worth of books and a handful of books down there, and they're just sitting on a pile waiting to be checked in, looked at, moved into the grading room, whatever, while all of this other stuff is just being shoveled through. I get why they do it, because while I may send a high ticket order in once or twice a year, these people are sending all this stuff in every week, every month. It's big money for them. Yeah. So I totally get it. I doubt we'll see them do that. I personally would love it. I think, to Rob's point, if they could do that, get their legs out from underneath them and just prepare themselves for the onslaught once they do get out from underneath this, that would be amazing. I would be the first person in line cheering for their success, just because at some point somebody's got to do something to fix this.